The wind off the Rockies cut through Blackwater like a promise and a threat. March in Montana Territory meant mud that swallowed wagon wheels whole, ice that formed in water troughs overnight, and a particular kind of loneliness that settled into a person's bones. Eliza Hart stood behind the counter of Morrow's General Store, her hands dusted with flour from the morning's baking, watching that wind rattle the windows. She'd been up since 4. Always was. The bread needed kneading before dawn, the rolls needed shaping, the pies needed crimping. Morrow paid her $3 a week and let her sleep in the storage room. It wasn't charity, she earned it. Her Parker House rolls brought customers from 2 towns over, and everyone knew it. More of them butter biscuits today? Old Jim Whelan shuffled in, smelling like tobacco and horses. Made a double batch. Eliza wrapped 6 in brown paper. That'll be 15 cents. He counted out the coins slowly. Arthritis had twisted his fingers into claws. You're too good for this place, Miss Hart. Someone ought to marry you proper. She smiled the way she'd learned to smile. Pleasant, distant, final. I do fine on my own, Mr. Whelan. After he left, she swept flour from the counter and tried not to think about the fact that she was 26 years old and living in a storage room. That she'd been in Blackwater for 8 months and hadn't made a single friend. That the women at church looked through her like glass, and the men looked at her in ways that made her check the lock on her door twice. The bell jangled. Eliza, you seen this? Sarah Pritchard burst in, waving a piece of paper. Behind her came Mary Chen and Constance Wells, all 3 of them red-faced and breathless. Seen what? This, Sarah slapped the notice on the counter. Posted at the land office this morning. Rhett Callahan is looking for a wife. Eliza picked it up. The paper was good quality, the handwriting precise. Notice, man of property seeks wife. Must be strong, honest, and willing to work. No drunkards, no gossips, no fragile temperaments. Life will be hard, but fair. Compensation, security, respect, share in all holdings, serious inquiries only. R. Callahan. Callahan Ranch, North Boundary. Can you believe it? Mary's voice dripped with scandalized delight. Like ordering a plow from a catalog. Who'd answer that? Constance wrinkled her nose. Everyone knows Rhett Callahan. He's a brute. Huge and mean and doesn't talk to anyone. He killed a man once, Sarah added, lowering her voice. Beat him to death with his bare hands. That was self-defense, Eliza said quietly. The man drew on him first. 3 pairs of eyes swiveled toward her. How do you know that? Sarah's tone sharpened. I heard Sheriff Dawson talking about it. Eliza kept her voice neutral. It was ruled lawful. Well, Sarah snatched the paper back. Lawful or not, the man's a savage. Lives up there alone like some kind of hermit. Got a ranch bigger than anyone's and works it himself because no one will work for him. Why won't anyone work for him? Eliza asked. Because he's terrifying, Mary said, as if explaining to a child. 6.5 feet tall, built like a bull, barely says 10 words a month. He comes to town for supplies, maybe 4 times a year, gets what he needs and leaves. Doesn't drink, doesn't gamble, doesn't go to church. Sounds like he minds his own business, Eliza said. Constance laughed. You defending him? You've never even met him. I'm not defending anyone. I just don't see what's wrong with posting a notice if you want a wife. What's wrong, Sarah said slowly, is that it's pathetic and desperate and proves he's so unpleasant that he can't find a woman the normal way. They left in a cloud of giggles and whispers, already planning who else to tell. Eliza stood there staring at the empty counter where the notice had been. Must be strong, honest, and willing to work. No drunkards, no gossips, no fragile temperaments. She thought about the storage room with its single cot and wash basin, the sidelong glances from married men whose wives pretended not to notice, the cold fact that she had $63 saved and nowhere to go with it. Compensation, security, respect, share in all holdings. Respect. When was the last time anyone had offered her that? By noon, the whole town knew. The Saloon crowd found it hilarious. Rhett Callahan, the meanest bastard in the territory, so desperate he had to advertise. The church ladies found it scandalous. What decent woman would respond to such a thing? The merchants found it unfortunate. Callahan spent money when he came to town, and if he brought home some mail-order bride who couldn't handle frontier life, they'd lose the business when she ran off. Eliza listened to all of it while she worked. She kneaded dough and shaped loaves and tried to ignore the growing certainty in her chest. She knew what people saw when they looked at her. A woman alone, past her prime, with no family and no prospects. Someone to be pitied at best, suspected at worst. She'd been in 7 towns in 3 years, and the pattern was always the same. Find work, keep her head down, save what she could. Stay until the questions started or the attention got too pointed, then move on. She was tired of moving on. At closing time, Eliza counted the register, swept the floor, and locked the front door. Then she went to the storage room, sat on her cot, and pulled out the small wooden box she kept under the floorboard. Inside, her savings, a deed to land in Kansas she'd never seen, a silver locket she couldn't pawn because it was the only thing left from before, and a folded newspaper clipping she'd carried for 2 years. She didn't unfold it. Didn't need to. She had it memorized. Woman sought in fraud investigation. She closed the box and pushed it back under the floor. Then she pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. Well, the ride to Callahan Ranch took 4 hours. Eliza left before dawn, telling Morrow she needed a day for personal business. She'd borrowed a horse from the livery, told them she was visiting a sick friend north of town, and paid double to ensure they wouldn't ask questions. The directions were simple. North Road to the Fork, West Trail to the boundary markers, then follow the creek until the valley opened up. She'd never been this far from town. The land changed as she rode, the scrub and sagebrush giving way to pine forests, the air getting colder and cleaner. Mountains rose in the distance, still snow-capped in March. It was beautiful in a harsh and different way. The valley appeared suddenly, spreading out below her like something from a painting. Grassland, water, timber, and in the middle, a ranch. Not some rough homestead, an actual working ranch. Corrals, outbuildings, a barn that could house 20 horses. The main house was solid timber, 2 stories with a wide porch and stone chimney. Smoke rose from the chimney in a straight line. Someone was home. Eliza's hands tightened on the reins. She'd rehearsed this a dozen times in her head, but now that she was here, the words evaporated. What was she doing? She didn't know this man. Didn't know anything except rumors and a carefully worded notice. Turn around, her mind whispered. Ride back to town. This is insane. But she'd spent 3 years running from insanity. Maybe it was time to run toward something instead. She rode down into the valley. Set. Rhett Callahan was shoeing a horse when he heard hoofbeats. He didn't look up immediately, just finished the nail he was driving, checked the fit, and set the hoof down gently. The gelding snorted and shifted. Easy. Rhett's voice was low, calm. The horse settled. Only then did he turn. A woman sat on a borrowed livery horse at the edge of his yard. Small-framed, dark hair pulled back, dressed practically in a split riding skirt and wool coat. She wasn't young, late 20s maybe, but she sat straight in the saddle and her eyes were steady. He knew who she was. The baker from Morrow's store. He'd seen her twice, both times from a distance. Noticed because she didn't stare or whisper when he came to town. Just kept working. Miss Hart. He didn't make it a question. Mr. Callahan. Her voice was quieter than he expected, but clear. I came about your notice. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. A crow called from the pine trees. The creek burbled somewhere out of sight. You read it? He asked finally. Yes. Understand what it says? I think so. You think so? He wiped his hands on a rag, considering her. Let me be clear then. I'm not looking for romance, not looking for someone to decorate a house or pour tea. I need a partner. Someone who can work, who won't break under pressure, who says what she means. That's what I'm offering in return. Partnership, not a fairy tale. I'm not looking for a fairy tale, Mr. Callahan. What are you looking for? She met his eyes. A place to stop running. Something in those words hit him sideways. He studied her more carefully. She looked tired, not physically, but in the deeper way. The way people looked when they'd been fighting too long. Running from what? He asked. Does it matter? Might. The law? No. He believed her. Couldn't say why, but he did. Disappointed someone, she continued. Made choices people didn't approve of. Got tired of explaining myself. People in town talk about me, he said bluntly. Say I'm mean, dangerous, killed a man. I heard. Doesn't bother you? You posted a notice instead of just taking what you wanted. That tells me something. He almost smiled. Almost. Come inside. I'll make coffee. The house was cleaner than she expected. Sparse, but well maintained. A kitchen with a good stove, a table and chairs, a sitting area with books on a shelf. Upstairs she could see doors, bedrooms probably. Everything was built to scale for a very large man. The doorways were tall, the furniture solid. Rhett moved through the space carefully, aware of his size in a way that suggested he'd learned to be careful around things that could break. He poured coffee from a pot on the stove. Milk? Black's fine. They sat across from each other at the table. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Why'd you post the notice? Eliza asked finally. Because I'm tired of being alone. Direct. No shame in it. Built this place over 10 years, got land, water, timber, livestock, everything a man could want except someone to share it with. I tried the regular way, talking to women at church socials, attending town dances. Didn't work. Why not? He gestured at himself. I make people nervous. Always have. Too big, too quiet. Women look at me and see something that might hurt them. Have you ever hurt anyone who didn't deserve it? No. Then they're fools. This time he did smile, just a little. Maybe. But fools or not, I got tired of trying. Figured I'd be honest about what I want. See if anyone was brave enough to answer. And I'm the first? Only, Eliza absorbed that. You don't know anything about me. I know you work hard. I know you show up every day and do your job without complaining. I know you don't gossip. I've watched you shut down conversations when people try. And I know you're here, which means you're braver than anyone gave you credit for. Or more desperate. Maybe both. He took a drink of coffee. Tell me about yourself. So she did. Not everything. Not the clipping or the real reason she kept moving. But enough. The work she'd done, the places she'd been. The fact that she had no family, no ties, nothing anchoring her to any particular place. Can you shoot? He asked. Rifle or pistol? Either. Both. Not fancy, but I can hit what I aim at. Can you ride? Well enough. Cook? Better than most. Handle livestock? I've helped with chickens and pigs, never cattle. I'll teach you. He paused. This isn't a small ranch, Eliza. It's 3,000 acres. I run 200 head of cattle, have contracts with the Army for beef. There's timber rights, water rights, mineral rights. If we marry, half of it becomes yours. Legally. I'll have papers drawn up. Her breath caught. That's fair, he interrupted. You'll be working it same as me. You'll earn it. Why would you trust me with that much? Because if I can't trust my wife, what's the point of having one? It was the most logical, least romantic proposal she'd ever heard, and somehow it made her want to cry. I need to think, she said. Take your time. Can I? She hesitated. Can I see the rest of the property? I'll saddle horses. They rode for 2 hours. He showed her the boundaries, the creek that never ran dry, the timber stands he was selectively harvesting, the cattle grazing in the south pasture, the barn with its organized tack room and grain storage, the garden plot, empty now but rich with soil. I'm not much of a gardener, he admitted, but the ground's good. You could grow anything. They stopped on a ridge overlooking the valley. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Below, the ranch spread out like a kingdom. It's beautiful, Eliza said quietly. It's hard, Rhett corrected. Winters are brutal. Sometimes we're snowed in for weeks. Cattle die, things break, people get hurt. You could go days without seeing another soul besides me. And you think that would bother me? He looked at her, really looked. I think you've spent a long time pretending to be smaller than you are. Quieter. Less. This place doesn't want that. It wants everything you've got. Something cracked open in her chest. When do you need an answer? She asked. No rush. Come back when you're ready. If you're ready. She turned her horse toward town, then stopped. Mr. Callahan? Rhett. Rhett. The name felt strange in her mouth. What happened to the man you killed? His jaw tightened. He was cheating at cards. I called him on it. He drew on me. Missed. I didn't. And people blame you for that? People need someone to be afraid of. Makes them feel safer, having a monster they can point to. He met her eyes. I stopped trying to convince them otherwise. Got more peace that way. She nodded slowly. I'll have an answer in 3 days. I'll be here. The ride back to Blackwater took longer than it should have. Eliza let the horse walk, her mind spinning. 3,000 acres. A partnership. Respect. She thought about the storage room, the sidelong looks, the endless moving. She thought about the clipping in her box and the fact that eventually someone would recognize her. Someone always did. But out there, in that valley, miles from town, who would find her? Who would care? The sun was setting when she reached Blackwater. The livery owner took the horse without comment, and Eliza walked back to Morrow's store in the dim light. Sarah Pritchard was waiting on the steps. Well? She demanded. We saw you leave. Where'd you go? Personal business? Don't lie. Jenny at the livery said you took a horse north. You went to see him, didn't you? Rhett Callahan. Eliza unlocked the door. Good night, Sarah. Are you insane? Sarah followed her inside. Do you know what people will say? I don't care what people say. You should. This is a small town. Reputation matters. Eliza turned, and something in her expression made Sarah step back. I have been in 7 towns in 3 years, Eliza said quietly. I have worked every job there is, kept my head down, caused no trouble. And in every single one, people like you decided who I was before I opened my mouth. So no, Sarah. I don't care what people say, not anymore. She walked into the storage room and closed the door. The next morning, Eliza found a rock through the front window of Morrow's store. Morrow arrived to find her sweeping glass, her face expressionless. What happened? He demanded. Someone's opinion, she said, about my personal business. This is about Callahan. It wasn't a question. Eliza, I like you. You're a good worker, but I can't have trouble. I haven't caused any trouble. You rode out to see him, alone. People will talk. Let them talk. It's not that simple. He ran a hand through his hair. I got a family, a reputation. If folks think I'm employing someone with loose morals, her voice could have cut steel. I visited a man who posted a public notice asking for a wife, in broad daylight, on a borrowed horse. How is that loose? It's not proper. Neither is throwing rocks through windows. They stared at each other. I'm sorry, Morrow said finally, but I need you to leave. You're firing me? I'm giving you a week's pay and a good reference. But yes, Eliza set down the broom. I'll be out by tonight. She packed her things in an hour. The wooden box, the few clothes she owned, her savings, stood in the empty storage room and felt nothing. No. That was wrong. She felt relief. She walked to the telegraph office and sent a message. R. Callahan. Callahan. Ranch stop answer is yes, stop E, heart. Then she sat in the boarding house lobby and waited. The reply came 3 hours later. Come tomorrow. Stop! Bring everything. Stop! R. Callahan. That night, Eliza lay in a rented bed and thought about the future. Not the past, not the clipping, not the fraud investigation she'd never speak of. Just the future. A valley, a ranch, a man who'd promised partnership and meant it. She fell asleep smiling. Shumt. Rhett was waiting at the boundary line when she arrived. He'd brought a pack horse for her things, and when she saw that, the forethought, the assumption that she'd have belongings worth carrying, something in her chest went warm. You came, he said. Did you think I wouldn't? Wasn't sure. They rode together, side by side. The valley opened up before them, golden in the late afternoon light. What happened in town? He asked. I got fired. He glanced at her. Because of me? Because of small minds and broken windows. Sorry. Don't be. I'm not. They reached the ranch as the sun touched the mountains. Rhett helped her down from the horse, his hands careful despite their size. I'll put your things in the guest room, he said. Unless you want the master bedroom, your choice. Guest room's fine for now. We'll go to the land office tomorrow, get the papers drawn up, then the judge, if you still want to go through with it. I do. He nodded, hesitated. This is going to be hard, Eliza. Harder than you think. I need you to know that. I've done hard before. Not like this. She looked up at him, this huge, careful man who'd built something out of nothing and was brave enough to ask for help. Then I'll learn, she said. That night they sat on the porch and watched stars appear. Rhett told her about the ranch, the work cycles, the seasonal demands, the things she'd need to know. Eliza listened and asked questions, and for the first time in years felt like she was exactly where she belonged. People in town are going to say things, Rhett said eventually, about you, about this. Let them. It won't be kind. I don't need kind, I need honest. He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone scared or opportunistic or desperate enough to overlook who I am. And instead, someone who sees straight through the bullshit. She smiled. Right back at you. They sat in comfortable silence until the cold drove them inside. Rhett showed her to the guest room. Clean sheets, a good bed, a window that looked over the valley. Thank you, Eliza said, for this, for taking a chance. Thank you for answering, he replied, for being brave enough. After he left, Eliza unpacked her box and set the locket on the nightstand. She didn't open it, didn't need to. Whatever was behind her could stay there. Tomorrow they'd ride to town. Tomorrow they'd sign papers and stand before a judge. Tomorrow they'd start building something neither of them had ever had before. Tonight, she was just grateful. The wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Eliza lay in the darkness and listened to the sounds of a place that might finally be home. Morning came cold and clear. Eliza woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, dressed quickly, and found Rhett in the kitchen. Made breakfast, he said, sliding a plate toward her. Wasn't sure what you liked. This is perfect. They ate in companionable quiet. Then Rhett stood, collected the plates, and turned to face her. Last chance to change your mind, he said. After we go to town, it gets complicated. I'm not changing my mind. You sure? She met his eyes. I've never been more sure of anything. Something passed between them then, not love, not yet, but recognition. Two people who'd been alone too long, choosing to stop. All right then, Rhett said. Let's go make this legal. They rode toward Blackwater side by side, the future uncertain but no longer empty. And in Eliza's pocket, folded small and tight, the newspaper clipping stayed hidden. For now. The land office smelled like old paper and tobacco smoke. Eliza stood beside Rhett, acutely aware of the stares burning into her back. Every chair in the waiting area was occupied. People who'd somehow learned they were coming and showed up to watch. Thomas Greeley, the land clerk, peered at them over his spectacles. This is highly irregular, Mr. Callahan. What's irregular about registering a marriage contract? Rhett's voice was level, but Eliza heard the edge underneath. Nothing, technically, but the terms you're proposing, Greeley tapped the papers Rhett had drafted. Equal ownership of all properties and holdings? That's not standard. Most men retain, I'm not most men. Rhett leaned forward slightly, just enough to make Greeley's chair creak as he pressed back. Are the documents legal or not? They're legal. Greeley's Adam's apple bobbed. Just unusual. Then file them. Behind them, someone whispered. Eliza didn't turn around. She'd learned years ago that looking only encouraged them. Greeley produced a ledger, dipped his pen, and began writing. The scratch of nib on paper filled the silence. When he finished, he rotated the book toward them. Sign here, both of you. Rhett signed first, his handwriting surprisingly elegant for hands that size. Then he offered the pen to Eliza. She hesitated. Once she signed, it was real. Binding, no going back. Her hand moved almost of its own accord. Eliza Jane Hart. Witnessed and recorded, Greeley said, blotting the page. You'll need Judge Morrison for the actual marriage. His office is across the square. They stepped out into cold sunshine. The crowd that had gathered in the land office spilled onto the street, following at a distance. Eliza felt their eyes like insects crawling on her skin. You all right? Rhett asked quietly. Fine. You don't look fine. I'm not used to being a spectacle. Get used to it. They'll watch us for weeks. He glanced back at the crowd, waiting for one of us to break. Prove them right. And if we don't, then they'll find something else to talk about. Eventually. Judge Morrison's office occupied the second floor of the courthouse. The judge himself was a compact man in his 60s, with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers. He looked up when they entered, then slowly removed his reading glasses. Rhett Callahan, been a while. Judge. Heard you were looking for a wife, didn't quite believe it. Morrison's gaze shifted to Eliza. And you are? Eliza Hart. The baker from Morrow's. He gestured to chairs. Sit. Both of you. Eliza sat. Rhett remained standing until Morrison gave him a pointed look, then folded himself into a chair that was too small for him. You understand what you're doing, Morrison addressed Eliza directly. Marriage is a legal contract, binding, not something to enter into lightly. I understand. Do you? He leaned back. Because from where I sit, this looks rushed. You've known Mr. Callahan for what, 3 days? 2, Eliza said. But I know what I need to know. Which is? That he's honest. That he's offering partnership, not ownership. That he'll keep his word. Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. He turned to Rhett. You explained the realities? The isolation? The work? I did. And you're prepared to honor the terms you filed at the land office? Equal ownership? Wouldn't have filed them otherwise. Morrison studied them both for a long moment. Then he pulled out a leather-bound book and opened it to a marked page. All right, join hands. Eliza's hand disappeared into Rhett's. His palm was calloused, warm, his grip careful. Morrison read through the ceremony quickly, without embellishment. There was no mention of love or cherishing, just legal obligations and witnessed consent. When he reached the end, he looked up. Rhett Callahan, do you take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Eliza Hart, do you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband? Her mouth was dry. The room felt airless. She thought about the storage room, the broken window, the endless moving. She thought about the valley and the ranch and the careful way Rhett had helped her down from her horse. I do. Then by the authority vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you married. Witnesses? 2 clerks appeared from the back room, signed the register, and disappeared again. That's it, Morrison said. You're legal. Rhett pulled out a leather purse and counted out bills. Morrison waved him off. No charge. Consider it a wedding gift. He closed the register. Advice, though, if you'll take it. People are going to test you, both of you. They'll poke and prod and wait for cracks. Don't give them any. Wasn't planning to, Rhett said. Good. Morrison stood, offered his hand. Mrs. Callahan, welcome to the territory. The name hit her like a fist. Mrs. Callahan. She wasn't Eliza Hart anymore. That person, the one who'd been running for 3 years, was gone. They walked out into the afternoon sun as husband and wife. The crowd had grown. Easily 40 people now, clustered in groups, whispering. Sarah Pritchard stood front and center, arms crossed, face pinched. Well, she called out, isn't this romantic? Rhett ignored her. Eliza tried to do the same. Must be true love, Sarah continued, louder now. 2 whole days of courtship. That's practically a lifetime. Leave it alone, Sarah. That was Mary Chen, surprisingly. It's their business. It's everyone's business when she makes a fool of herself. Sarah stepped closer. Did you tell him, Eliza, about why you keep moving? About why you never stay anywhere long? Eliza's stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Sarah's smile was vicious. Because I have a cousin in Kansas. She writes letters. Very detailed letters. The world tilted. Eliza forced herself to breathe normally, to keep her expression neutral. I've never been to Kansas. That's not what Rebecca says. She says there was a woman there, ran off after some trouble with money. Fraud, she called it. Woman matched your description perfectly. Your cousin's mistaken. Is she? Sarah looked at Rhett. You might want to ask your new wife about her past, Mr. Callahan, before you find out the hard way. Rhett's jaw was tight. He looked down at Eliza, question in his eyes. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. The clipping in her box burned in her mind like it was on fire. We're leaving. Rhett's voice cut through the noise. He took Eliza's arm, gently but firmly, and steered her toward the horses. Behind them, Sarah's voice rose triumphant. That's what I thought. Running again, Eliza? How long before you run from him, too? Eliza climbed onto her horse with shaking hands. Rhett mounted beside her, and they rode out of Blackwater at a trot that became a canter. They didn't speak until the ranch appeared in the distance. Rhett slowed his horse. Is it true? It's complicated. That's not an answer. Eliza pulled her horse to a stop. Her hands were still shaking. Yes, part of it. He turned in his saddle to face her fully. Which part? There was trouble in Kansas, with money, but it wasn't fraud. Not the way Sarah made it sound. Tell me what happened. She looked at the valley, the ranch, the life she'd had for exactly 4 hours. I worked for a bank, as a clerk. My supervisor was embezzling, moving money between accounts, falsifying records. When I figured it out, I reported it. But he had connections and I didn't. By the time the investigators arrived, he'd made it look like I was the one stealing. Were you? No. Can you prove it? No, he destroyed the evidence, my word against his, and his word carried more weight. Rhett was quiet for a long time. Why didn't you stay and fight? Because I would have lost, and probably ended up in prison. She met his eyes. I ran because I was scared, and I've been running ever since. That why you keep moving? Someone might recognize you? Yes. He looked toward the ranch, then back at her. You lied to me. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. Same thing. Is it? Her voice cracked. If I'd told you in the beginning, would you have let me come here? Would you have married me? I don't know. The honesty of it cut deeper than anger would have. Eliza gathered her reins. I understand if you want to annul this. I'll leave. You won't hear from me again. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere else. I'm good at that. Rhett studied her face. Whatever he was looking for, she didn't know if he found it. Come on, he said finally. It's getting cold. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Inside the house, Rhett built up the fire while Eliza stood awkwardly in the kitchen. The warmth from the morning felt like it belonged to different people. I need to know something, Rhett said without turning around. And I need the truth. All right? Did you steal that money? No. Would you steal from me? Never. He faced her. How do I know that? You don't. She met his gaze. You have to decide whether to trust me. Same way I had to decide whether to trust you. That's different. How? I haven't been running from the law. You've been running from people's opinions, from their fear. You said so yourself. She took a step closer. You think I don't understand what that's like? Being judged before anyone knows you? Having everyone decide who you are based on rumors and fear? His expression shifted. That's not the same, isn't it? You're as much a fugitive as I am. You just never left town. The words hung between them. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. I should have told you, Eliza said quietly. Before we signed papers, before the judge. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it. No, but it's all I have. She pulled off her coat, folded it over a chair. I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Give you time to think. In the morning, if you want me gone, I'll go. You're not sleeping in the barn. Then what? You're my wife. The word came out rough. Legally. That means something. I don't break contracts, Eliza, even ones I might regret. It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. I see. Do you? He moved closer, and for the first time his sighs felt threatening. Because I just promised to share everything I've built with someone who's been lying since the moment she got here. I never lied to you. You let me believe you were someone you're not. No. Her voice sharpened. I let you believe I was someone simple, someone without complications. But that's not who either of us are, Rhett. We're both complicated, both running from something. The only difference is my past might actually catch up with me. He turned away, braced his hands on the mantel. His shoulders were rigid. I need time, he said. Take it. Stay in the guest room. Don't. He stopped. Just give me space. Eliza climbed the stairs on legs that felt like wood. In the guest room, she closed the door and leaned against it, eyes burning. What had she expected? That honesty would fix everything? That he'd understand and forgive and they'd move forward like nothing happened? She'd gambled everything on a man she barely knew, and now she was learning the price. The box under her bed seemed to pulse with accusation. She pulled it out, opened it, and stared at the clipping. Woman sought in fraud investigation. Eliza Jane Hart, former employee of First National Bank of Topeka, wanted for questioning regarding. She'd memorized every word years ago. They didn't get less damning with time. A knock on the door made her jump. She shoved the box back under the bed. Yes? Rhett's voice came through the wood. There's stew on the stove. You should eat. I'm not hungry. Silence. Then footsteps retreating down the hall. Eliza lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling until dark came. Sometime after midnight, she woke to sounds from downstairs. Footsteps. The clink of glass. She crept to the door and listened. Rhett was pacing. She could hear the floorboards creak under his weight, the rhythm of someone working through a problem. She almost went down, almost knocked and tried to explain better. But what more could she say? Instead, she climbed back into bed and waited for morning. Dawn came gray and cold. Eliza dressed, braided her hair, and went downstairs expecting to find Rhett waiting with an ultimatum. The kitchen was empty. A note sat on the table in his precise handwriting. Gone to check the north fence. Back by afternoon. Coffee's hot. She poured a cup and sat at the table, trying to figure out what the note meant. Was he avoiding her, giving them both space? Or just doing the work that needed doing regardless of personal drama? The house felt enormous around her. She washed the few dishes in the sink, swept the floor, wiped down surfaces that were already clean. Trying to be useful. Trying to prove something to a man who wasn't there to see it. By noon, she couldn't stand the waiting anymore. She pulled on her coat and went outside. The ranch looked different in daylight, without Rhett to guide her. Bigger. More complex. She walked to the barn where half a dozen horses turned to watch her approach. Hey! She offered her hand to a gray mare. I'm Eliza. We met yesterday, but you probably don't remember. The mare sniffed her palm, found nothing interesting, and turned away. Fair enough. She explored the barn properly. The tack room with its organized rows of saddles and bridles, the feed room with its neat barrels, the workshop with tools hanging on pegboards. Everything had a place. Everything was maintained. It was the barn of someone who cared. Someone who built things meant to last. She was examining a hand-carved bridle hook when hoofbeats announced Rhett's return. She stepped out into the yard as he dismounted. Fence is fixed, he said without preamble. Cattle were getting through to the creek. Had to reset 2 posts. Do you need help with anything? He looked at her for a long moment. You know how to muck stalls? I can learn? Come on then. He showed her how to use the pitchfork, where to pile the soiled hay, how to spread fresh bedding. The work was hard and unglamorous, and her shoulders ached within 20 minutes. Rhett worked beside her without talking. They mucked 4 stalls in silence before he finally spoke. I thought about what you said, about both of us running. Eliza leaned on her pitchfork, waiting. You're right, he continued. I've been hiding here same as you've been hiding by moving. Different methods, same result. Does that change anything? Maybe. He drove his pitchfork into a pile of hay. I'm not good at trust, Eliza. Never have been. People talk, people lie, people decide who you are, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I stopped trying. Built this place where I didn't have to trust anyone. And then you posted a notice asking for a wife. Yeah, he almost smiled. Wasn't my smartest move. Or maybe it was. He looked at her. I want to believe you. About Kansas. About why you ran. But you don't. But I can't verify it. Can't prove it one way or the other, so I have to choose. And I'm choosing to trust you. He held up a hand before she could speak. Not because I'm sure. Because I'm not. But because if I can't trust my wife, then nothing else matters. This whole thing falls apart. Relief flooded through her so hard she had to grip the pitchfork to stay upright. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Trust works both ways, Eliza. I'm trusting you with this ranch, with everything I've built. You need to trust me back. I do. Prove it. Tell me something you haven't told anyone else. She hesitated. The clipping flashed in her mind, but there were other things. Smaller things. True things. The man in Kansas, she said slowly. My supervisor. His name was Richard Vaughn. He was married, had 3 children. Everyone loved him. He donated to the church, sponsored orphans, gave speeches about civic duty. And he offered to help me when I first started at the bank, said I showed promise, invited me to dinners at his house, introduced me to his wife. I thought he was being kind. Rhett's expression darkened. What did he do? Started making suggestions about my appearance, my clothes. Then the suggestions became demands, private meetings, locked doors. She forced herself to keep talking. I refused, reported it to his superior. 3 days later, the investigation started. Into me. He set you up. He protected himself. I was expendable. Rhett was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. Is he still in Kansas? I don't know. I haven't looked back. If he ever comes here, he won't. Men like him don't follow women like me. They just destroy us and move on. The words tasted like ash. Eliza went back to mucking the stall, needing the physical work to ground her. Rhett worked beside her. After a while, he said, I believe you. Why? Because that story didn't make you look good. You could have left that part out, made yourself the perfect victim, but you didn't. I'm not a perfect anything. Neither am I. He dumped a load of soiled hay into the wheelbarrow. But maybe we can be imperfect together. Something in Eliza's chest loosened. Not all the way. There was still the clipping, still the fact that Sarah Pritchard's cousin might write more letters, still the possibility that everything could collapse. But for now, in this barn, mucking stalls beside a man who'd chosen to trust her, it was enough. They worked until dusk, then washed up at the pump and went inside. Rhett made supper, venison steaks, fried potatoes, canned beans, simple food, well cooked. Tomorrow, he said over dinner, I'll start teaching you the ranch, cattle handling, fence repair, water management. It'll take months to learn everything, but we've got time. What about the house? What about it? Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing? He shrugged. We'll split it. I can cook, you can cook. I can clean, you can clean. We both live here. That's not very traditional. When have either of us been traditional? She smiled despite herself. Fair point. After dinner, they sat by the fire. Rhett read from a book about cattle breeding. Eliza mended a tear in her riding skirt. The silence between them felt different now, less fraught, more settled. Can I ask you something? Eliza said eventually. Go ahead. Why did you really post that notice? The truth. He closed his book. I told you. I was lonely. There's more to it than that. He stared into the fire. My parents died when I was 16. Cholera. I inherited this land, 500 acres back then, and spent the next 10 years building it up. Every spare cent went into cattle, fencing, building. I didn't have time for courting or socializing. And then I woke up one day and realized I was 32 years old and completely alone. I'd built something worth having, but there was no one to share it with, no one to pass it to. He looked at her. I didn't want to die alone in this house. Didn't want everything I'd worked for to just disappear. So you wanted children? Eventually, maybe. But mostly I just wanted a partner, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone who'd remember me when I'm gone. The honesty of it took her breath away. I'll remember you. Yeah? His voice was rough. Even if this doesn't work out? Even then. They sat in silence until the fire burned down to embers. Then Rhett stood, stretched, and headed for the stairs. At the landing, he paused. Eliza? Yes? I'm glad you answered the notice. So am I. He nodded once and disappeared down the hall. Eliza stayed by the fire a while longer, watching the embers glow and fade. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, learning the ranch, proving herself, keeping Sarah Pritchard's suspicions from spreading. But tonight, she had a home. A husband who'd chosen to trust her despite every reason not to. It was more than she'd had in years. She climbed the stairs to the guest room, changed into her nightgown, and slid between clean sheets. Outside, an owl called. The house settled with creaks and groans, and somewhere in town she knew Sarah Pritchard was writing letters. But that was a problem for tomorrow. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised Eliza with its steadiness. She woke before dawn, dressed in the work clothes Rhett had bought her in town. Sturdy canvas pants, flannel shirts, boots that actually fit. Together they'd feed the horses, check the cattle, mend whatever had broken overnight. The work was relentless and her body ached in places she didn't know existed, but there was satisfaction in it, purpose. Rhett taught her everything without condescension: how to read cattle behavior, how to spot illness before it spread, how to handle a rope without burning her hands raw. When she failed, and she failed often those first weeks, he simply showed her again. "You're picking this up faster than I expected," he said one morning as she successfully separated a calf from the herd for inspection. "Had good motivation to learn." "Which is?" "Not looking incompetent in front of my husband." He almost smiled. "You're doing fine." Fine wasn't great, but it was honest. Eliza would take honest over flattery any day. They still slept in separate rooms. Neither of them mentioned it. The marriage was legal on paper, a partnership in practice. But whatever else it might become remained unspoken. Some nights Eliza would lie awake and wonder if Rhett regretted it, the rushed wedding, the complications she'd brought. But in the morning he'd be in the kitchen making coffee, and they'd start another day of work, and the wondering would fade. 3 weeks after the wedding, they rode into Blackwater for supplies. Eliza had suggested going alone, but Rhett refused. "We go together," he said. "Show them we're solid." "Are we?" He looked at her. "Getting there." The town felt hostile the moment they arrived. Conversation stopped when they passed. Women crossed the street to avoid them. In Morrow's store, where a new clerk had replaced Eliza, the man refused to make eye contact while he tallied their order. "That'll be $18, he muttered. Rhett counted out the money. "Heard you got a new shipment of nails. Need 3 boxes of the 4-inch. "Out of stock." "Jenkins across the street says you got them yesterday." The clerk's face reddened. "Must have sold out." "Must have." Rhett's voice was flat. He picked up their supplies. "Come on, Eliza." Outside, she stopped him. "Why didn't you push back? You know he was lying. What's the point? He'd just lie more." Rhett loaded the supplies into the wagon. "People here made up their minds about us. Nothing we do will change that. So we just accept it? We outlast it. Eventually something more interesting will happen, and they'll move on." But as they loaded the last of the supplies, Sheriff Dawson approached. He was a weathered man in his 50s with gray in his beard and eyes that missed nothing. "Rhett, Mrs. Callahan." "Sheriff, got a minute?" They followed him to the shade of the livery stable. Dawson pulled out a piece of paper, unfolded it carefully. "This came through 2 days ago. Telegraph from Kansas, Marshal's office." Eliza's blood turned to ice. "They're looking for a woman named Eliza Jane Hart, wanted for questioning in a fraud case from 3 years back." Dawson's eyes settled on her. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you, Mrs. Callahan?" Her mouth was too dry to speak. Beside her, Rhett had gone very still. "What's the charge?" Rhett asked. "Embezzlement. $20,000 from First National Bank of Topeka." Dawson refolded the paper. "Says she was a clerk there. Disappeared before they could question her properly." "I didn't steal anything," Eliza managed. "That's so." "Yes?" "Then why'd you run?" "Because staying would have meant prison for a crime I didn't commit." Dawson studied her. "That's convenient." "It's the truth." "Truth is, I got a legal inquiry here. Says to detain you if found and contact the Kansas Marshal." He shifted his weight. "Now I could do that. Wire them back, hold you until they send someone to collect you. That'd be by the book." "But," Rhett's voice was dangerous, "but I've known you 10 years, Rhett. You've never given me a moment's trouble. Pay your taxes, follow the law, keep to yourself. So I'm inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt." He looked at Eliza. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to wire Kansas that the inquiry came to nothing. No one by that name in Blackwater. But Mrs. Callahan, you need to understand, if anyone else makes the connection, if this comes back on me, I won't be able to help you." "Why are you helping now?" Eliza asked. "Because I don't like the smell of this. $20,000 is a lot of money. If you'd really stolen that much, you wouldn't be living on a ranch mucking stalls. You'd be in San Francisco or Denver living high." He tucked the paper away. "Also, Sarah Pritchard's been in my office every other day demanding I investigate you. When Sarah wants something that bad, it usually means she's wrong." Despite everything, Eliza almost laughed. "Thank you, Sheriff," Rhett said. "Don't thank me. Just keep your heads down. And Mrs. Callahan, If you really are innocent, you might want to think about clearing your name. Running only works for so long. They left town quickly after that. Neither spoke until they were miles away, the ranch visible in the distance. You should have told me it was 20,000, Rhett said finally. Would it have mattered? Yeah. Makes it harder to believe you're innocent. Eliza's hands tightened on the reins. I had access to the accounts. Richard, my supervisor, knew that. When he needed someone to blame, I was perfect. Young, no family, no connections. Easy target. How'd he take the money? Created false accounts. Moved money in small amounts over 2 years. By the time anyone noticed, he'd built a paper trail that led straight to me. And you couldn't prove otherwise? I tried. But he was careful. Every transaction had my clerk code on it. Every falsified record had my handwriting, or good enough forgeries. When I went to the bank president, Richard was already there with documentation showing I'd been stealing. So you ran. So I ran. She looked at him. I'm sorry. I know this makes things harder for you. Yeah, it does. He was quiet for a moment. But Dawson was right about one thing. If you'd really stolen that much, you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere warm, spending it. You believe me? I'm trying to. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was something. They spent the rest of the ride in silence. At the ranch, Rhett unloaded supplies while Eliza tended the horses. The work was familiar now, almost comforting. Brush, feed, water. Simple tasks with clear results. She was finishing up when Rhett appeared in the barn doorway. We need to talk about what happens if someone else figures it out, if Dawson can't protect you. I leave. Just like that? What else can I do? I won't let you lose everything because of me. He stepped closer. You're my wife, Eliza. Legally bound. If you run, it reflects on me. Makes me look like a fool who got conned. Better a fool than an accomplice. I don't care about looking like a fool. His voice roughened. But I care about keeping my word. I promised you partnership, security. I'm not breaking that promise. Even if it costs you the ranch? Even then. She stared at him. That's insane. Maybe, but it's also the truth. He leaned against a stall door. We need a plan. Something better than you running and me pretending I didn't know. What kind of plan? The kind where we prove you didn't do it. Eliza laughed, but there was no humor in it. How? Richard Vaughn had 3 years to cover his tracks. By now there's probably nothing left to find. Maybe, but you said he was embezzling for 2 years before you caught him. That's a long time. Hard to hide that much money for that long without leaving traces. He's probably spent it by now. Has he? Rhett crossed his arms. Because men who embezzle don't usually stop. They get away with it once, they try again. Maybe he's still at the bank. Maybe he's still stealing. And maybe he's gone and the trail's cold and I'm just delaying the inevitable. Or maybe we find something. He pushed off the door. Either way, it beats waiting for the hammer to drop. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to explain that hope was dangerous, that reaching back into the past would only pull the future down around them. But the set of Rhett's jaw told her he'd already decided. How would we even start? She asked. Write to the bank, ask questions, hire someone to investigate if we have to. That costs money. I have money. Not for this, not for my mistakes. Our mistakes now. He met her eyes. We're in this together, Eliza, for better or worse. Those were the words, weren't they? She'd heard them from Judge Morrison, but they'd felt abstract then. Legal language. Now standing in the barn with hay dust floating in the late sun, they felt real. All right, she said. We try, but if it doesn't work, it'll work. His confidence was either inspiring or terrifying. Eliza couldn't decide which. That night, they sat at the kitchen table with paper and pen. Rhett wanted to write to the bank president. Eliza argued for a lawyer instead, someone with authority to ask questions without raising suspicions. Lawyers cost money, Rhett said. So does a wild goose chase. You got a better idea? She thought about it. What about a Pinkerton agent? A detective. They investigate fraud. It's what they do. Rhett considered this. Expensive. Everything's expensive. At least this way we might get results. He tapped the pen against the table. All right, we'll write to their Denver office, see what they say. They composed the letter together, editing and revising until the wording was right. Not too desperate, not too vague. Just a simple request for investigation into possible ongoing embezzlement at First National Bank of Topeka. Should we mention you? Rhett asked. No. Let them find the connection on their own. If we seem too invested, they'll charge more. He sealed the envelope. I'll post it tomorrow. Thank you, Eliza said quietly. For this. For believing me. Haven't proven anything yet. No, but you're trying. That's more than anyone else has done. He looked at her across the table, something shifting in his expression. You're not what I expected, Eliza Callahan. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Haven't decided yet. She smiled despite herself. Fair enough. They sat in companionable silence until the fire burned low. Then Rhett stood, stretched, and headed for the stairs. At the landing, he paused. Eliza? Yes? If this goes bad, if Dawson can't protect you and the Pinkertons find nothing, I want you to know I don't regret it. Any of it. Her throat tightened. Neither do I. He nodded and disappeared down the hall. Eliza stayed at the table, staring at the sealed envelope. It represented either salvation or disaster, and she wouldn't know which until it was too late to change course. But Rhett was right about one thing. Waiting for the hammer to drop was worse than swinging it yourself. She cleaned up the kitchen, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring more work, more learning, more of the careful dance they were doing around each other. But tonight, she had a husband who believed her enough to fight. It was more than she dared hope for. Sleep came slowly. When it did, she dreamed of Kansas, of Richard Vaughn's office with its leather chairs and mahogany desk. Of the moment she'd realized what he was doing, the sick certainty that no one would believe her if she told. In the dream, she tried to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The office door locked. Richard stood in front of her, smiling. Did you really think you could escape? He asked. I made you, Eliza. I can unmake you just as easily. She woke gasping, heart pounding. Dawn was hours away. The house was silent except for the wind. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Then Rhett's door opened. You all right? His voice carried through the darkness. Just a dream. About Kansas? Yes. Silence, then footsteps. He appeared in her doorway, a large shadow in the dim light from the window. Want to talk about it? Not really. Want some company? I'll stay in the chair, just until you fall back asleep. She should have said no, should have maintained the careful distance they'd established. But the dream clung to her like cobwebs, and the thought of being alone with it made her chest tight. All right. He settled into the chair by the window, his frame too large for it. Neither of them spoke. Eliza lay in the darkness, listening to him breathe, and felt some of the panic ease. Thank you, she whispered. Go to sleep, Eliza. She did, eventually. And this time, the dreams stayed away. When she woke in the morning, Rhett was gone. The chair sat empty by the window, but on the nightstand sat a cup of coffee, still warm. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and waiting. Rhett posted the letter to the Pinkerton agency. They heard nothing back. Meanwhile, the ranch demanded constant attention. A section of fence collapsed in a storm. 3 calves got sick and had to be isolated. The barn roof started leaking and needed repair. Eliza threw herself into the work, learning not just how to do things, but why. Understanding the patterns of the cattle, the rhythm of the seasons, the way Rhett had structured everything to maximize efficiency. You're getting good at this, he said one afternoon as she successfully sutured a gash on a horse's leg. Had a good teacher. Still, most people would have given up by now. I'm not most people. No. He watched her finish the stitching. You're not. Something was shifting between them. Small things. The way he'd started leaving coffee for her in the mornings. The way she'd begun mending his clothes without being asked. The conversations that stretched longer each evening, covering everything from cattle breeding to books they'd read. They still slept in separate rooms, but the distance felt less permanent now. One night, 6 weeks after the wedding, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Rhett had brought out a bottle of whiskey. Good stuff, not the rot gut from town. Special occasion? Eliza asked. Not really, just felt like it. He poured 2 glasses, handed her one. To surviving 6 weeks. Is that an accomplishment? For two people who barely knew each other? Yeah. She clinked her glass against his. The whiskey burned going down, warm and sharp. Can I ask you something? Rhett said after a while. Go ahead. The locket you keep on your nightstand. You never open it. Why? Eliza's hand went unconsciously to her throat, though she wasn't wearing it. It's from before. Before what? Before everything went wrong, before Kansas, before running, when I still thought the world made sense. What's inside? A photograph. My parents. They dead? Yes. Fever took them when I was 19, left me with nothing but that locket and some debts. She took another sip. I worked for 2 years to pay those debts. That's how I ended up at the bank. They were hiring clerks, and I needed steady work. That's when you met Vaughn. Yes. Rhett was quiet. Then, you ever think about what you would have done if none of that happened? If you'd paid the debts and just kept working? Sometimes. Probably would have married some shopkeeper. Had a few kids. Lived a quiet life. Would you have been happy? I don't know. Maybe. I didn't think much about happiness back then. Just survival. And now? She looked at him. Now I think about both. His expression was unreadable in the fading light. That's something, I guess. They finished the whiskey in silence. When Eliza stood to go inside, Rhett caught her hand. I'm glad you answered the notice, he said. You said that before. Saying it again, in case you forgot. She squeezed his hand. I didn't forget. Inside, she climbed the stairs with warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with whiskey. Things weren't perfect. The threat from Kansas still hung over them, and they were still navigating what their marriage actually meant. But for the first time in years, Eliza felt like she was building something instead of running from something. The difference mattered. 2 days later, the letter came. Rhett brought it back from town, his expression tight. Eliza was in the garden. She'd started planting, despite it being early, and looked up when she heard the horse. Pinkerton Agency, he said, dismounting. Replied faster than I expected. They went inside. Rhett slit the envelope carefully, pulled out 2 pages of dense writing. What's it say? Eliza couldn't read it from where she stood. They'll take the case. $50 retainer, plus expenses. They've got an agent in Kansas who can start immediately. $50 is a lot. It's fine. Rhett, it's fine, he repeated firmly. I told you, we're in this together. He kept reading. They want a detailed statement from you. Everything you remember about Vaughn's activities, dates, amounts, anything that might help. Eliza's stomach nodded. That means writing it all down, making it official. You have a problem with that? It makes it real. Makes it harder to pretend it didn't happen. He set the letter down. It happened whether you write it or not. Question is, do you want to fix it or keep running? She knew he was right, had known it since Dawson showed them the telegraph. Running had bought her time, but time eventually ran out. All right, she said. I'll write it. It took 3 days to compose the statement. Eliza sat at the kitchen table for hours, reconstructing everything she could remember. Account numbers, transaction dates, the pattern of Vaughn's absences from the office. Every detail felt like reopening a wound, but she forced herself to continue. Rhett read it when she finished, his expression growing darker with each page. He really did set you up perfectly, he said finally. I told you. Reading it is different than hearing it. He set the pages down, so this bastard knew exactly what he was doing, and he got away with it. Maybe not for much longer. Rhett sealed the statement in an envelope. I'll post this tomorrow, then we wait. How long? Agency said 4 to 6 weeks for a full investigation. 6 weeks felt like eternity, but Eliza nodded. Then we wait. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what would happen if the Pinkertons found nothing, if Vaughn had covered his tracks too well, or if he'd left the bank, or if the whole investigation dead-ended. She'd have to run again. Probably farther this time. Maybe California, maybe Mexico. And Rhett. What would happen to Rhett? He'd lose his reputation, his standing in the community. People would say he'd been duped by a criminal. He'd be humiliated. The thought made her sick. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs. Rhett was already there, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey. Can't sleep either? he asked without turning. No. Thinking about Kansas? Thinking about what happens if this doesn't work. He took a drink. We deal with it. Easy to say. Not easy at all. He faced her. But it's the truth. Whatever happens, we deal with it, together. You keep saying that, together, but you didn't sign up for this mess. I signed up for you. The mess came with. Despite everything, she almost smiled. That's a terrible deal. Maybe. But it's the one I made. He poured a second glass, offered it to her. Stop worrying about protecting me, Eliza. I'm a grown man. I knew what I was doing when I married you. Did you? No, he admitted, but I knew enough. Knew you were running from something. Knew it might catch up with us. I chose to risk it anyway. Why? He was quiet for a long moment. Because being alone was worse than any risk you brought with you. The honesty of it stole her breath. She took the whiskey, drank, felt it burn. I'm scared, she said quietly. I haven't been this scared since Kansas. Good. Good. Means you care about something. About this place. About us. He set his glass down. You can't run from fear, Eliza. It just follows you. Better to stand and face it. And if we lose, then we lose knowing we tried. She wanted to believe him, wanted to have his certainty, his willingness to face whatever came. But all she had was fear and the knowledge that everything she'd started to build could collapse at any moment. Rhett seemed to read her thoughts. He crossed the room, stopped in front of her. Listen to me. Whatever happens with Kansas, whatever the Pinkertons find or don't find, you're not alone in this, you understand? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Say it. I understand. Good. He squeezed her shoulder, brief, grounding. Now go to bed. Tomorrow's going to be long. She climbed the stairs, glass still in hand. At her door, she looked back. Rhett stood at the window again, silhouetted against the darkness. He'd chosen to fight for her. The least she could do was let him. The Pinkerton letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 8 weeks after they'd sent the statement. Eliza was feeding chickens when she saw Rhett riding hard from town, dust trailing behind him. The way he sat his horse, rigid, focused, told her something had changed. She met him at the barn. He dismounted without a word, pulled an envelope from his coat, and handed it to her. Good news or bad? She asked, suddenly afraid to open it. Don't know yet. Came straight back. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside were 3 pages, densely written. She read the first paragraph twice before the words made sense. They found something, she whispered. Rhett moved beside her. What? Vaughn's still at the bank, still in the same position. Her eyes scanned faster. The Pinkerton agent, his name's Marcus Webb. He posed as an auditor, found irregularities in 12 accounts. Same pattern as before. Small withdrawals over time, always under the threshold that would trigger review. How much? $32,000 over the past 3 years. Rhett let out a low whistle. He didn't stop. No. He got better at it. She kept reading. Webb says he has documentation, bank records, ledgers, everything, but there's a problem. Of course there is. Vaughn's been promoted. He's vice president now, has friends on the board. Webb says if he tries to expose this without solid proof of the earlier fraud, Vaughn will just blame it on someone else. Like he did with you. Exactly. Eliza's chest felt tight. Webb needs the original investigation files from 3 years ago. Wants to compare the patterns, prove it's the same person. But those files are sealed. He can't access them without... She stopped, read the next section again. Without what? Rhett prompted. Without me. They need me to testify, to give a deposition under oath about what I witnessed back then. The words hung between them like a death sentence. That means going back, Rhett said. Yes. They'll arrest you. Probably. He took the letter, read it himself. His jaw worked as he got to the same section. Webb says he can arrange protection, get you immunity in exchange for testimony. He says he'll try, no guarantees, so you could go back and still end up in prison. Yes. Rhett folded the letter carefully. Then you don't go. What? You heard me. Too risky. Webb can find another way. There is no other way. You read it yourself. Without the connection to the old case, Vaughn just sets up another scapegoat. Not your problem. She stared at him. How is it not my problem? He destroyed my life, Rhett. He's still out there destroying other lives. And now we have a chance to stop him. We have a chance to get you arrested. Maybe, but Webb thinks he can work with the prosecutor, get immunity before I even set foot in Kansas. He thinks that's not good enough. It's the only option we have. Rhett's expression went dark. No. The option we have is to stay here, keep our heads down, and let this blow over. You've built a life, Eliza, a real one. Why would you risk that? Because it's not real if I'm always looking over my shoulder. Because every time someone comes to town asking questions, I have to wonder if this is it. If this is when it all falls apart. She stepped closer. I'm tired of running, Rhett. You were right about that. Fear just follows you. I want to face it. Not if it means prison. Then what? Live here pretending everything's fine until it's not? Until someone besides Dawson makes the connection and I don't have a choice? He turned away, braced his hands on the fence. A horse whinnied in the corral. Chickens pecked at the ground, oblivious to the conversation tearing through their lives. This is my fault, Rhett said finally. I pushed you to investigate, to hire the Pinkertons. If I just left it alone, I'd still be waiting for the hammer to drop. At least this way I have some control. Control. He laughed bitterly. You call walking into a prosecutor's office with a warrant over your head control? More than I've had in 3 years. He faced her. And if they don't give you immunity? If they arrest you the moment you arrive? Then Webb says he'll pull every string he has, get the case reopened, present his evidence, make them see I was set up. And you trust him? I trust that he wants to close this case. Successful prosecutions make reputations. If he can take down a bank vice president for embezzlement, that's good for him. Rhett studied her face. You've already decided, haven't you? I need to do this. Even if I ask you not to? The question caught her off guard. Are you asking? He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. No, because that wouldn't be fair. This is your life, your choice. Then help me make it. How? Come with me. His eyes widened slightly. To Kansas? Yes. Webb says the deposition could take a week, maybe more. I don't want to do this alone. Eliza, please. She hated how small her voice sounded. I know it's a lot to ask. The ranch needs you, and I'm probably being selfish. But I'm scared, Rhett, terrified. And you're the only person I trust. Something shifted in his expression. The anger faded, replaced by something softer. All right, he said quietly. I'll come. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. But we do this smart. I want everything in writing from Webb before we leave. Immunity agreement, witness protection, everything. And I want a lawyer, someone who represents you, not the prosecutors. That costs money. I don't care what it cost. His voice was firm. You're not walking into this unprotected. She nodded, throat too tight to speak. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Rhett sent a telegraph to Webb laying out their conditions. The reply came that evening. Webb agreed to everything. He'd have a lawyer waiting in Topeka, and the prosecutor had already indicated willingness to negotiate immunity in exchange for testimony. That was fast, Eliza said, reading the telegraph. Too fast? Maybe. Or maybe Webb's just good at his job. Or maybe the prosecutor knows his case against Vaughn is weak without you. She looked up. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you cautious. Webb needs you. The prosecutor needs you. That gives you leverage. Don't forget that. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. They arranged for a neighbor, an older man named Garrett, who lived 10 miles east, to check the cattle and horses while they were gone. Eliza packed a bag with her few good clothes, trying not to think about the fact that she might be wearing them in a courtroom. The night before they left, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind racing through every possible outcome. Prison. Immunity. Vaughn's face when he realized she'd come back. The testimony itself. Would she remember enough? What if she got the dates wrong, the amounts wrong? What if her nervousness made her look guilty? A knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. You awake? Rhett's voice. Yes? He opened the door, leaned against the frame. Figured you might be. Too much thinking. Yeah. He came in, settled into the chair by the window. Want to talk about it? Not really. They sat in silence. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. An owl called from the trees. I keep wondering what I'll say to him, Eliza said eventually. To Vaughn. If I see him. You don't have to say anything. Let your testimony do the talking. But what if I want to? What if I want him to know what he did to me, how he destroyed everything? Rhett considered this. Then you tell him. But don't expect it to matter. Men like that don't care who they hurt. I know, but I still want him to hear it. Then make sure you survive this first. Can't tell him anything from a prison cell. She almost smiled. Always so practical. Someone has to be. He stayed in the chair until she fell asleep, and when she woke in the gray pre-dawn light, he was gone. But there was coffee waiting downstairs, and breakfast already cooked, and somehow that steadied her more than any words could have. They left at first light. The train east departed Blackwater at 9, which meant a 3-hour ride to the station. Garrett met them at the ranch to see them off, his weathered face creased with concern. You sure about this? He asked Rhett. No, but we're doing it anyway. Well, Ranch will be here when you get back. I'll keep an eye on things. Appreciate it. They rode in silence, the morning cold and clear. Eliza tried to memorize everything, the mountains, the valley, the way the sun hit the trees in case she didn't come back, in case this was the last time she saw it. At the station, Rhett bought tickets to Topeka via Denver. The route would take 3 days with transfers, 3 days trapped on trains with her own thoughts. You all right? Rhett asked as they waited on the platform. Ask me when this is over. The train arrived in a cloud of steam and noise. They boarded, found seats, and settled in for the long journey. Eliza watched Montana disappear through the window, feeling like she was leaving more than just a place. The train rocked and swayed. Other passengers chatted, dozed, read newspapers. Eliza couldn't focus on anything. Beside her, Rhett sat quietly, his presence solid and grounding. Thank you, she said after a while, for coming with me. You already thanked me. I know, but I mean it. He looked at her. I know you do. They changed trains in Denver, then again in Kansas City. Each stop brought them closer to Topeka, closer to whatever waited there. Eliza's nerves stretched tighter with every mile. On the third day, as the train pulled into Topeka Station, Rhett touched her arm. Whatever happens, he said, remember you didn't do anything wrong. They're the ones who should be scared, not you. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel brave and righteous and ready. Instead, she just felt sick. The station platform was crowded. Eliza scanned faces, looking for Webb. She'd never met him, only seen the name on letters. Mrs. Callahan? A man in a dark suit approached. 30s, clean-shaven, sharp eyes. Marcus Webb, Pinkerton Agency. Rhett stepped slightly in front of Eliza. You have the immunity agreement? Direct. I like that. Webb pulled papers from his briefcase. Everything's here. Judge approved it this morning. Mrs. Callahan testifies fully and truthfully about Richard Vaughn's activities at First National Bank, and all charges against her are dropped. No prosecution, no jail time, clean record. Eliza took the papers with shaking hands. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. She was safe, legally protected. What's the catch? Rhett asked. No catch. Prosecutor wants Vaughn more than he wants her, but she needs to testify within 48 hours, or the deal expires. That's not much time to prepare. She's had 3 years to prepare. Webb's tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. Look, I understand your concern, but Vaughn's attorney is already making noise. We need to move fast before he can bury evidence or disappear. Where is he now? Eliza asked. At the bank. Business as usual. He doesn't know we're coming. Webb checked his pocket watch. We're meeting with the prosecutor in an hour. I'll brief you on what to expect, then we prep for the deposition tomorrow. Tomorrow? Eliza's stomach lurched. Is that a problem? I thought we'd have more time. We did. Then Vaughn's lawyer filed a motion to quash the investigation. Judge denied it, but it accelerated the timeline. Webb gestured toward a waiting carriage. Come on, we can talk on the way to my office. The carriage ride took 20 minutes. Webb laid out the situation quickly, efficiently. The prosecutor had strong evidence of recent embezzlement, but needed the connection to the old case to establish pattern and intent. Eliza's testimony would provide that bridge. "What about witnesses?" Rhett asked. "Anyone else from the bank who can corroborate?" "Two clerks who worked with Mrs. Callahan are still employed there. We've subpoenaed them, but their testimony only covers what they observed, not the full scope of Vaughn's activities." "And the bank president?" "Retired, moved to California. We're trying to locate him, but it'll take time." Eliza listened to them talk, feeling strangely detached. This was her life they were discussing, her past, her future. But it felt like someone else's story. Webb's office was efficient and impersonal. Papers covered the desk, filing cabinets lined the walls. He offered them coffee, which they both declined. "All right," Webb said, settling into his chair. "Let's go through what you remember. Start from when you first noticed something wrong." Eliza took a breath and began. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Webb took notes, occasionally asking questions. Rhett sat beside her, quiet but present. It took 2 hours to cover everything. When she finished, her throat was raw and her head ached. "That's good," Webb said, reviewing his notes. "Very detailed. The prosecutor will want to hear it exactly like that tomorrow." "What if I forget something?" "You won't. But if you do, we'll have these notes as reference." He set down his pen. "Now, I need to warn you. Vaughn's attorney will try to discredit you. He'll bring up the fact that you ran, that you didn't defend yourself 3 years ago. He'll make it sound like guilt." "I know." "You need to stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate. Don't get defensive. Just tell the truth." "I can do that." "Good." Webb stood. "I've arranged rooms for you at the Eldridge Hotel. Get some rest. We'll meet at the courthouse at 9 tomorrow morning." Outside, dusk was falling. The streets of Topeka felt alien and familiar at the same time. Eliza had walked these sidewalks 3 years ago, a different person with a different life. "You all right?" Rhett asked as they walked to the hotel. "I was just thinking, last time I was here I was running. Now I'm running toward something instead of away. That's progress. Or insanity. Maybe both." The hotel was nicer than anywhere Eliza had stayed in years. Clean sheets, hot water, a real bed. Rhett got a separate room down the hall. "I'll be right here if you need anything," he said at her door. "Thank you." She went inside, closed the door, and sat on the bed. Tomorrow she'd face Richard Vaughn. Tomorrow she'd tell the truth and hope it was enough. Tonight she just needed to survive her own thoughts. A knock came an hour later. She opened the door to find Rhett holding 2 plates of food. "Figured you wouldn't go down to the dining room," he said. "Brought dinner." They ate in her room, mostly in silence. The food was good, but Eliza could barely taste it. "You don't have to do this," Rhett said eventually. "We can leave right now, go back to Montana. Forget all of this." "And then what? Spend the rest of my life waiting?" "Maybe, but you'd be free." "I wouldn't be free. I'd be hiding." She set down her fork. "I need to do this, Rhett. For me. Not for Webb, or the prosecutor, or anyone else. For me." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll be there. Right beside you. You can't come into the deposition. I'll be outside the door. Close enough." That night, Eliza dreamed of the bank. Of Richard Vaughn's office, the leather chairs, the moment she'd realized what he was doing. But this time, when she tried to speak, to tell someone, her voice worked. And people listened. She woke early, dressed in her best clothes, and met Rhett in the lobby. Webb was waiting with the lawyer he'd promised, a woman named Catherine Marsh, 40-ish, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Mrs. Callahan," she said, shaking Eliza's hand, "I've reviewed your case. The immunity agreement is solid. As long as you testify truthfully, you're protected." "What about after, when Vaughn goes to trial?" "You'll likely be called as a witness then too, but the immunity covers all testimony related to this case." Marsh glanced at her notes. "I understand you're nervous. That's normal. Just remember, you're not on trial here. Vaughn is." The courthouse was imposing, all stone and columns. Inside, the halls echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. Webb led them to a small conference room where the prosecutor waited. "Mrs. Callahan, I'm Daniel Pierce." The prosecutor was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with tired eyes and ink stains on his cuffs. Thank you for coming forward. I didn't have much choice, perhaps, but you're here now, and that takes courage. He opened a folder. Let's talk about what happens next. You'll give your deposition under oath. Vaughn's attorney will be present. He'll object. He'll question you. But remember, you're under immunity. Nothing you say can be used against you. What if I say something wrong? If I misremember dates or amounts? Then we correct it. This isn't about perfection. It's about establishing pattern and intent. Pierce leaned forward. Richard Vaughn has stolen from this bank for years. He's destroyed careers, ruined lives. Your testimony helps us stop him. That's what matters. Eliza nodded, throat tight. One more thing, Pierce said. Vaughn will be in the room. He has the right to face his accuser. The room tilted. He'll be there? Yes, can you handle that? Could she? Eliza thought about the ranch, about the life she'd built, about Rhett standing beside her through all of this. Yes, she said, I can handle it. Pierce smiled slightly. Good. We start in 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like seconds. Then a bailiff was leading her down a hall into a large room with a long table. The court reporter sat ready. Pierce took his seat, and across the table sat Richard Vaughn. He looked exactly the same. A little older, maybe, but the same calculating eyes, the same expensive suit, the same easy smile. He looked at Eliza like she was a bug under glass. Well, he said, Eliza Hart, I wondered when you'd resurface. It's Callahan now, she heard herself say. Eliza Callahan. His smile widened. Congratulations. Marriage agrees with you. Mr. Vaughn, Pierce said sharply, you'll have your chance to speak. For now, be quiet. The deposition began. Pierce asked her to state her name, her connection to First National Bank, the dates of her employment. Basic questions, easy questions. Then the hard ones started. Tell me about your relationship with Richard Vaughn. Eliza looked at Pierce, not Vaughn. He was my supervisor. When I started at the bank, he offered to mentor me. And did he? For a while. Then the mentoring became something else. Explain. So she did. The whole story, from the beginning. The dinners at his house, the locked doors, the propositions she refused. Vaughn's attorney objected twice, but Pierce overruled him. And when you reported this behavior? Pierce prompted. He was ready. Had documentation showing I was the one stealing. But you weren't. No. How can you be certain Mr. Vaughn was responsible? Because I saw the ledgers, saw the falsified entries, my clerk code on transactions I never authorized. Did you keep copies? I tried, but they disappeared from my desk. Vaughn's attorney leaned forward. Convenient. Marsh cut in. My client is under oath, counselor. If you have questions, ask them properly. The deposition continued for 3 hours. They broke for lunch, then resumed. By the end, Eliza's head pounded and her hands shook from gripping the arms of her chair. But she'd done it. Told the truth. All of it. Pierce gathered his notes. Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. We'll be in touch about the trial date. Vaughn stood, buttoned his jacket. As he passed Eliza, he leaned in close. You think this changes anything? His voice was barely a whisper. I've been untouchable for 3 years. I'll be untouchable when this farce ends. We'll see, Eliza said. He smiled. Yes, we will. Then he was gone, his attorney trailing behind. Eliza sat in the empty room, exhausted. Marsh touched her shoulder. You did well. Very well. When will we know if it's enough? Pierce says he'll have a decision on charges within a week. If he moves forward, the trial could be 3 to 6 months out. That long? Fraud cases are complex, but your testimony today was strong. I think he'll indict. Outside the room, Rhett was waiting. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms. Eliza sagged against him, finally letting herself feel everything she'd been holding back. It's done, she said into his shirt. I did it. I know. I'm proud of you. They left the courthouse into late afternoon sun. Topeka bustled around them, indifferent to the weight of what had just happened. How long before we can go home? Eliza asked. Webb says we should stay until Pierce makes his decision. Few more days. All right, I can do a few more days. But that night, in her hotel room, doubt crept in. What if Pierce decided the case wasn't strong enough? What if Vaughn's connections protected him again? What if she'd come all this way for nothing? She was still awake at midnight when the knock came. She opened the door to find Rhett in the hall. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No." "Me either." He gestured to the room. "Can I come in?" They sat by the window watching the street below. A drunk stumbled past. A carriage rattled by. "You think it's enough?" Eliza asked. "What I said today?" "I think it's the truth. Whether that's enough depends on Pierce. I keep wondering what happens if Vaughn walks away from this. If he just goes back to the bank like nothing happened. Then we go home and live our lives, and eventually someone else will catch him. Men like that always get caught." "You really believe that?" "I have to." He looked at her. "Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" She leaned against his shoulder, too tired to maintain distance. He didn't pull away. They sat like that until dawn, watching Topeka wake up, waiting to see if truth would be enough. The call came on their fourth day in Topeka. Eliza was picking at breakfast in the hotel dining room when a messenger arrived with a note from Webb. Pierce wanted to see them. Immediately. "That's either very good or very bad," Rhett said, reading over her shoulder. "Which do you think?" "No idea, but sitting here guessing won't help." They found Pierce in his office, papers scattered across his desk like a windstorm had hit it. He looked like he hadn't slept. Webb stood by the window, arms crossed. "Mrs. Callahan, Mr. Callahan." Pierce gestured to chairs. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "You have news?" Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I do. We're moving forward with charges against Richard Vaughn. Grand jury convenes tomorrow morning. I expect indictment by afternoon." Relief flooded through her so hard she had to grip the chair arm. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be. Your testimony was compelling. Combined with Webb's documentation of recent activity, we have a solid case." Pierce pulled out a file. "But there's a complication." Of course there was. Eliza braced herself. "What kind?" "Vaughn's attorney filed a motion this morning. Claims you're an unreliable witness due to your fugitive status. Says the immunity agreement was coerced, that you'd say anything to avoid prosecution." "That's not true." "I know, but his argument has some merit in the eyes of the court, which means we need to shore up your credibility." Pierce looked at Webb. "Tell them." Webb turned from the window. "We found the bank president, Samuel Morrison. He's in San Francisco, and he's willing to testify." "About what?" Rhett asked. "About the original investigation 3 years ago. Turns out he had doubts even then about Vaughn's version of events. But Vaughn's father-in-law sat on the bank's board, and Morrison was pressured to close the case quickly." Eliza's breath caught. "He knew I might be innocent?" "He suspected. Didn't have proof, so he did what the board wanted. But it's eaten at him ever since." Webb pulled out a telegram. "He's willing to testify that the investigation was rushed and incomplete, that there were irregularities he was told to ignore." "Will that be enough?" Eliza asked Pierce. "Combined with everything else?" "Yes. It establishes reasonable doubt about the original case and supports your version of events." Pierce leaned back. "Morrison arrives tomorrow. We'll prep him, get his deposition, present it to the grand jury along with yours." "And then?" "Then we wait for indictment. If it comes through, trial's probably 4 months out. You'll need to come back to testify. 4 months. 4 months of waiting, wondering, living in limbo. But at least it was movement, progress." "There's something else," Webb said. "Vaughn tried to access his office files last night. After hours. Security stopped him, called the police. When they searched him, he had $50,000 in cash and a train ticket to Mexico." Rhett whistled low. "He was running. Trying to. Judge revoked his bail this morning. He's sitting in county jail right now." Webb's smile was grim. "Seems your testimony rattled him more than he let on." Eliza thought about Vaughn's confident smile, his whispered threat. He'd been so sure of himself. And now he was in a cell. "When can we go home?" she asked. "Today, if you want," Pierce said. "We have everything we need from you for now. Just be prepared to come back for trial." "I will." They left Pierce's office into bright morning sun. The city felt different now, less threatening, more manageable. Eliza took a deep breath and felt something loosen in her chest. "It's really happening," she said. "He's actually going to face consequences." Looks like it. Rhett touched her back. How does it feel? Strange. Good. Terrifying. She looked up at him. Real. They packed quickly, eager to leave Topeka behind. At the station, waiting for the westbound train, Eliza bought a newspaper. The headline stopped her cold. Bank Vice President arrested in embezzlement scheme. She read the article twice. It mentioned Vaughn's attempted flight, the $50,000 in cash, the ongoing investigation. Her name appeared once, referred to only as a former employee who came forward with information. They kept you mostly out of it, Rhett observed, reading over her shoulder. Webb's doing, probably, trying to protect me from attention. Smart man. The train ride home felt different than the journey out. Lighter, somehow, despite the uncertainty ahead. Eliza watched the landscape change from Kansas plains to Colorado mountains, feeling like she was shedding something with each mile. You're quiet, Rhett said on the second day. Just thinking. About? About how much has changed in 2 months. I went from hiding in a storage room to being married to you to facing down the man who destroyed my life. She shook her head. Doesn't seem real. Which part? All of it. Especially the part where you stuck by me through everything. He was quiet for a moment. You say that like it's surprising. Isn't it? You barely knew me. Had every reason to wash your hands of the whole mess. Yeah, but I didn't want to. He met her eyes. Still don't. Something passed between them then. Something that had been building since the wedding. Not love exactly. They weren't there yet. But the foundation of it. The recognition that what they'd built was worth keeping. When we get back, Eliza said, I'd like to move into the master bedroom, if that's all right. Rhett's expression shifted. You sure? I'm sure. We're married. Legally, in practice. Might as well make it real in all the ways. All the ways? She felt her face heat but held his gaze. All the ways? He smiled, a real smile, not his usual half version. All right then. Master bedroom it is. They reached Blackwater on the third day, late afternoon. The town looked the same but felt different. Or maybe Eliza was different. Either way, she didn't feel the same dread walking down the main street. At the livery, while Rhett arranged for horses, the stable hand gave Eliza a strange look. Heard you were in Kansas, he said, testifying against some bank fellow. Word traveled fast. Where'd you hear that? Telegraph operator. Saw the messages going back and forth. He lowered his voice. That true? What they're saying about you being set up? It's complicated. Most things are. He let out 2 horses. For what it's worth, Sarah Pritchard's been real quiet since you left. Guess she figured out she was wrong about you. Or she's just waiting for the trial. Maybe. But people talk. Some are saying you got guts coming back to face it instead of running. It was more than Eliza expected. She thanked him and mounted up. The ride to the ranch felt like coming home. The valley opened before them as the sun touched the mountains, everything gold and green and familiar. Garrett had kept his word. The cattle grazed peacefully, the barn was tidy, nothing broken or neglected. Feels good to be back, Rhett said, dismounting. Yeah, it does. They spent the evening settling in, checking everything, falling back into the rhythm of the place. After dinner, Eliza packed up her things from the guest room. It didn't take long, she'd never fully unpacked there anyway. The master bedroom was larger, with windows facing the valley and a bed big enough for 2. Eliza set her few belongings on the dresser, suddenly nervous. Having second thoughts? Rhett stood in the doorway. No, just wondering how this works. How what works? This. Us. We got married for partnership, but we're becoming something else. I don't know what to call it. He came closer. Does it need a name? I don't know. Maybe not. She looked up at him. I care about you, Rhett. More than I planned to. More than might be smart. Why wouldn't it be smart? Because caring makes you vulnerable. And I've spent 3 years trying not to be vulnerable. And how'd that work out? She almost laughed. Not great, actually. Then maybe try something different. He touched her face, gentle despite his size. I care about you too, Eliza. Have for a while now. Wasn't planning on it either, but here we are. Here we are? She echoed. He kissed her then, slow and careful. She leaned into him, and felt the last of her walls come down. That night, they shared the bed for the first time. Not just legally married, but actually together in all the ways that mattered. And when Eliza woke in the morning with Rhett's arm around her, the valley visible through the window, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. The weeks that followed were the best Eliza had known. They worked the ranch together, now more in sync than ever. Rhett taught her the things he'd been holding back, the business side, the contracts, the long-term planning, treating her like the true partner he'd promised. "Why didn't you show me this before?" she asked one evening, reviewing the ledgers. "Wanted to make sure you'd stay first. And now you're sure?" "Now I'm sure." They made love regularly, learning each other, finding a rhythm that surprised them both with its ease. The separate rooms became storage. The house became theirs, not his. 6 weeks after returning from Kansas, a letter came from Pierce. The grand jury had indicted Vaughn on 18 counts of embezzlement, fraud, and falsifying records. Trial was set for September. 3 months, Eliza said, reading the letter. That's not much time. Enough to get the harvest in. We'll go back after. We? You think I'm letting you face trial alone? After everything? She kissed him. Thank you. Stop thanking me. We're partners, remember? Summer came warm and bright. The cattle thrived, the garden produced more than they could eat, and Eliza fell into the work with satisfaction she'd never found anywhere else. She also started baking again, not for money, but because she missed it. Rhett loved her bread, said it was better than anything in town. You should sell it, he suggested. People would buy. You want me to go back to Morrow's? No, I mean here. We could set up a stall at the Saturday market. You bake, I'll manage the ranch. Extra income never hurts. She considered it. I'll think about it. But the idea took root. She started experimenting with recipes, perfecting techniques. By July, she had 6 varieties of bread and 4 kinds of pie. Rhett built her a proper outdoor oven, and she began baking in larger quantities. The Saturday market in Blackwater was smaller than she remembered. Maybe a dozen stalls, mostly produce and crafts. Eliza set up at the end, her bread displayed on clean cloths. People stared at first, whispered. But then someone bought a loaf, old Jim Whelan, who'd been one of her first customers at Morrow's. Heard you were back, he said. Glad to see it. Others followed. By noon, she'd sold everything. Well, Rhett said as they packed up, guess that answers whether people would buy. Guess so. Sarah Pritchard appeared as they were loading the wagon. Eliza tensed, but Sarah's expression was complicated, embarrassed maybe, or something close to it. Mrs. Callahan, she said formally, I heard about Kansas, about the trial. Did you? Yes, and Sarah stopped, swallowed. I may have been wrong about you, about some things. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close. Eliza decided to take it. We all make mistakes, some worse than others. Sarah glanced at Rhett, then back to Eliza. If you need anything, for the trial, character witnesses or such, I'd be willing. Eliza stared. Why would you do that? Because I was cruel and wrong, and I'd like to make it right if I can. I'll think about it, Eliza said. Sarah nodded and left. Rhett helped Eliza into the wagon. Never saw that coming, he said. Neither did I. You going to take her up on it? Maybe. Pierce said character witnesses could help. She looked back at the market, at the people who'd bought her bread. I think I'm finally becoming part of this place, actually belonging instead of just hiding. Took long enough? She elbowed him. Some things take time. August passed in a blur of work and preparation. Pierce sent lists of questions to review, details to remember. Morrison's deposition had been powerful. His testimony about the rushed investigation, the pressure from Vaughn's connections, his own doubts. Combined with Webb's documentation and Eliza's testimony, the case looked strong. But Vaughn had hired expensive lawyers. They were fighting hard, filing motions, demanding delays. The trial date moved twice before finally settling on late September. Cutting it close to winter, Rhett observed, we'll need to be back by mid-October to prepare for snow. We will be. You sound sure. I am. One way or another, this ends in September. The week before they left for Kansas, Garrett came by to discuss ranch coverage, but he brought someone with him, his nephew Thomas, 18 and looking for work. Thought you might need more help, Garrett said. Thomas here is good with cattle, hard worker, could stay on permanent if things work out. Rhett interviewed the boy, liked what he saw. Trial could run 2 weeks, maybe 3. You're all right covering that long? Yes, sir. Uncle Garrett showed me everything. They hired him on the spot. Eliza felt relief. She'd been worried about leaving the ranch again, but with 2 men watching it, she could focus on the trial. The night before they left, Eliza couldn't sleep. She stood at the bedroom window, watching moonlight on the valley. Rhett came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Nervous? Terrified. It'll be all right. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. He rested his chin on her head. Whatever happens, we have this place. We have each other. The rest is just details. She turned in his arms. I love you, you know. Haven't said it yet, but I do. His expression softened. I love you too. Have for a while. Since when? Since you showed up at my ranch with nothing but guts and hope. Maybe before that, when I watched you work at Morrow's and thought, there's someone who doesn't quit. I almost quit a dozen times, but you didn't. That's what matters. They made love slowly, taking their time, memorizing each other. In the morning, they rode for Blackwater in the train that would take them to Kansas and whatever waited there. The courtroom was packed. Eliza sat beside Catherine Marsh at the plaintiff's table, Pierce on Marsh's other side. Across the aisle, Richard Vaughn sat in an expensive suit, flanked by 3 lawyers. He looked thinner than before, older. Jail had worn him down, but his eyes were still cold when they met Eliza's. The trial lasted 9 days. Pierce methodically built his case. Webb's documentation first, showing the pattern of embezzlement over the past 3 years. Then the 2 bank clerks, who testified about suspicious transactions they'd witnessed. Then Morrison, who explained the flaws in the original investigation. Vaughn's lawyers attacked everything. They called the clerks unreliable, Morrison biased, Webb's methods questionable. They painted Vaughn as a dedicated employee being railroaded by jealous subordinates and an incompetent investigation. On day 6, Eliza took the stand. Pierce walked her through her story carefully. Her employment at the bank, her relationship with Vaughn, what she'd discovered, how she'd reported it, the falsified records, the setup, the decision to run. Why did you come back? Pierce asked. Because running didn't work. I was just delaying the inevitable, and because Mr. Vaughn needed to face consequences for what he did. Even if it meant risking prison yourself? Yes. Why? Eliza looked at Vaughn. Because what he did to me, he's done to others. Will keep doing if someone doesn't stop him. I didn't want that on my conscience. Pierce finished. Then Vaughn's lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Carver, stood. Mrs. Callahan, you claim my client set you up 3 years ago, correct? Yes. Yet you have no proof of this. No documents, no witnesses, nothing but your word. The proof was destroyed. Convenient. Tell me, how much money did you take from the bank? I didn't take anything. The original investigation concluded otherwise. The original investigation was compromised, according to you, according to Mr. Morrison, who we've established had his own grudges against my client. Carver paced. Isn't it true, Mrs. Callahan, that you ran because you were guilty, that you've concocted this elaborate story to avoid responsibility? No. Then why run? If you were truly innocent, why not stay and fight? Because I was scared. Because I had no money for lawyers, no connections, and I knew how it would end. So you admit to being a coward, Marsh objected. The judge sustained it. But the damage was done. Carver continued hammering for 2 hours. Eliza held her ground, answering carefully, but by the end she was exhausted. That night in the hotel, she collapsed into bed. I did terribly. You did fine, Rhett said. He made me look like a liar. That's his job. Doesn't mean the jury believed him. You don't know that. Neither do you. So stop guessing and get some sleep. The trial continued. Vaughn took the stand, smooth and confident. He denied everything, painted himself as a victim of jealous employees and overzealous prosecutors. His wife testified, crying, talking about his charity work and devotion to family. Eliza watched it all and felt her hope fade. He was good. Too good. But then Pierce's rebuttal case began. A forensic accountant testified about the money trail, how it flowed from the bank to accounts Vaughn controlled. A handwriting expert compared the falsified records to samples of Vaughn's writing. The evidence was technical, dense, but damning. On day 9, closing arguments. Pierce spoke first. He laid out the case methodically, connecting every piece of evidence to Vaughn. This man stole from his employer, betrayed his position of trust, and destroyed lives to cover his crimes. The evidence is clear. The pattern is undeniable. Richard Vaughn is guilty. Then Carver stood. He argued reasonable doubt, attacked the prosecution's witnesses, suggested the whole case was built on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a woman who'd fled rather than face justice. Ask yourselves, Carver said, who's really on trial here? My client, who has served this bank faithfully for 15 years? Or Eliza Callahan, who ran from the law and only came back when offered immunity? The jury deliberated for 2 days. Eliza spent them pacing the hotel, unable to eat or sleep. Rhett tried to distract her with walks, with food, with conversation. Nothing worked. On the afternoon of the second day, word came. Verdict. They rushed to the courthouse. The gallery was packed, people standing in the aisles. Eliza took her seat, Rhett directly behind her. The jury filed in. 12 faces, all carefully neutral. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On count 1, embezzlement, how do you find? Guilty. Eliza's breath caught. On count 2, fraud, how do you find? Guilty. 18 counts. Guilty on 17 of them. Vaughn sat frozen as the verdict was read. His lawyers immediately requested appeal. The judge denied it, set sentencing for 3 weeks. Eliza barely heard the rest. It was over. Actually over. Outside the courthouse, Pierce found them. Congratulations, Mrs. Callahan. Justice served. How long will he get? 20 years minimum, maybe more. Pierce shook her hand. You did good. This case sets precedent for prosecuting bank fraud. We couldn't have done it without you. Webb appeared next. Mrs. Callahan, Mr. Callahan, hell of a case. Thank you for everything, Eliza said. Just doing my job. He handed her an envelope. Final accounting, Pinkerton fee, minus the retainer you paid, and your witness compensation from the court. Eliza opened it. A check for $300. That's too much, she protested. That's what you're owed. Take it. Build something good with it. That evening, they had dinner at a nice restaurant. Eliza ordered wine and felt the tension of the past months finally drain away. It's really over, she said. Yeah, it is. I keep expecting something else to happen. Some other complication. There won't be. Vaughn's done. You're free. Free. The word felt strange. Eliza tested it in her mind, turned it over. Free from running, from hiding, from fear. What do we do now? She asked. We go home. We work the ranch. We live our lives. Rhett raised his glass. To freedom. She clinked her glass against his. To freedom. They left Kansas the next morning, the final chapter closed. The train ride west felt different this time, not weighted with dread or anticipation, just peaceful. They were heading home. At Blackwater Station, Garrett and Thomas waited with the wagon. How'd it go? Garrett asked. Guilty, Rhett said. All counts. Well, that's justice then. They rode to the ranch in comfortable silence. When the valley appeared, Eliza felt her chest expand. This was hers. Actually hers. No one could take it away. The ranch looked perfect. Garrett and Thomas had maintained everything beautifully. After paying Thomas his wages and thanking them both, Eliza and Rhett stood in the yard watching the sunset. Feels different, doesn't it? Rhett said. Being back. Everything feels different, like I can finally breathe. Think you'll miss the excitement? The drama? No, I'll take boring any day. He laughed. Boring's underrated. That night, in bed, Eliza thought about the long path that had led her here. The bank in Kansas, the years of running, the notice that had changed everything. She'd risked everything on a stranger's promise, and somehow it had worked. What are you thinking about? Rhett asked. About how lucky I am. Lucky? To have found you, to have this place, to have a second chance. I'm the lucky one, he said. You answered my notice. Could have been anyone, but it was you. Best decision I ever made. Second best. What's first? Coming back to face Vaughn, that took real courage. She rolled to face him. I had help. Couldn't have done it alone. Maybe, but you're the one who stood up there and told the truth. That was all you. They fell asleep tangled together, safe and whole. The harvest came in strong that year. Between the cattle sales and Eliza's baking business, which had grown steadily, they had their best financial year yet. Rhett started talking about expansion, maybe buying adjacent land. We could run 400 head, he said one evening, reviewing the books. With Thomas full-time and maybe another hand, it's manageable. You trust Thomas that much? I do. Kid's solid. Reminds me of myself at that age. They hired a second hand in November, built an addition to the barn, improved the irrigation. The ranch was thriving. Christmas came cold and bright. Eliza baked pies for the church social, her first time attending since the wedding. People were warm, welcoming. Sarah Pritchard actually apologized properly this time. I was cruel, she said, and wrong. I'm sorry. Apology accepted, Eliza said. We all make mistakes. Some bigger than others, but thank you. Sarah hesitated. I'm glad you stayed. Glad things worked out. So am I. In January, a letter came from Pierce. Vaughn had been sentenced to 22 years in the territorial prison. His appeals had been denied. The case was finally, completely closed. Eliza read the letter twice, then burned it in the fireplace. That's it then, Rhett said, watching the paper curl and blacken. Over. Over, Eliza agreed. Spring brought new calves and the first signs of pregnancy, Eliza's own. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be certain before telling Rhett. You're sure? He asked, stunned. Doctor confirmed it yesterday in town, due in September. He swept her into his arms, careful despite his excitement. We're having a baby. We are. I don't even... He stopped, started again. I'm going to be a father. Terrified yet? Completely. You? Out of my mind. They laughed together, holding each other, imagining the future. The baby came early, late August instead of September. A girl, healthy and loud. They named her Sarah, not after Sarah Pritchard, but after Rhett's mother. Eliza held her daughter and felt something shift permanently. This tiny person, this new life, she represented everything Eliza had fought for. Security, family, belonging. She's perfect, Rhett said, touching the baby's small hand. She is. Think we're ready for this? No, but we'll figure it out. They did. The ranch adjusted around the baby. Thomas and the second hand took more responsibility. Eliza reduced her baking but didn't stop entirely. She liked the work, liked contributing. Sarah grew fast, hitting milestones with determination that reminded Eliza of herself. By her first birthday, she was walking, babbling, getting into everything. She's going to be trouble, Rhett said, watching Sarah pull herself up on the furniture. Good. Trouble means she's brave. Like her mother, Eliza smiled, hopefully smarter. 2 years after the trial, a final letter came from Kansas. The bank had recovered most of the stolen money from Vaughn's hidden accounts. As the primary witness in the case, Eliza was entitled to a reward, $5,000. She stared at the check, unable to process the amount. That's life-changing money, Rhett said. What should we do with it? Your choice. You earned it. She thought about it for a week, then made her decision. I want to put it toward the ranch. Buy that adjacent land you've been eyeing. Build Sarah a proper schoolroom so she doesn't have to go to town. Maybe hire another hand. You sure? You could do anything with that money. I'm doing what I want. Investing in our future. They bought the land, 800 acres of prime grazing. The ranch grew to nearly 4,000 acres, one of the largest in the territory. They built the schoolroom, hired a teacher for Sarah and the other ranch children. The operation became almost entirely self-sufficient. 3 years after Sarah came Thomas, named after the hand who'd proven himself indispensable. Then 2 years later, Margaret. The house expanded, filled with noise and life. Eliza's baking business evolved into a full bakery in town. She hired help, expanded the offerings. It became profitable enough to support itself, with proceeds going to a fund for the children's education. Rhett built the ranch into something legendary. People came from 3 territories to buy his cattle. His methods became the standard others tried to copy. Together they created something that lasted. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Sarah was teaching Thomas to rope, Margaret toddling after them. "You ever think about Kansas?" Rhett asked. "Sometimes, but not like before." "What's different?" "It doesn't hurt anymore. It's just something that happened. Part of the story, but not the whole story." He pulled her close. "What's the whole story?" "Still being written, I think." "What chapter are we in now?" She smiled. "The good one." Years passed. The children grew, the ranch prospered, the territory became a state. Eliza and Rhett grew old together, their partnership deepening into something neither had thought possible when he'd posted that blunt notice asking for a wife. People in Blackwater told stories about them. About the woman who'd answered a stranger's notice, about the man who'd chosen to trust her despite everything, about how they'd built an empire from nothing but work and faith in each other. The stories weren't always accurate, but the heart of them was true. 2 people, both running from loneliness in different ways, had chosen each other. And in choosing, had created something worth having. Sarah, the eldest, eventually took over the ranch. She had her mother's determination and her father's discipline. Under her management, it grew even more. Thomas became a lawyer, moved to Denver, but came home every Christmas with his own growing family. Margaret married a teacher, settled in Blackwater, continued her mother's baking business, and expanded it into a restaurant that became famous across the state. Rhett died at 72, peacefully, in his sleep. Eliza held his hand as he went, grateful for every day they'd had together. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for choosing me." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Best decision I ever made." She lived another 8 years without him, long enough to see her grandchildren grown, to know the ranch would continue, to understand that what they'd built would last beyond both of them. On her last day, sitting on the porch with Sarah beside her, Eliza looked out at the valley that had become home. "You did good, Ma," Sarah said. "Everything you built, everything you fought for, it worked." "We did good," Eliza corrected. "Your father and I together. That was the secret." "What was?" "Finding someone who sees you for who you really are. Not who you're running from or who you're trying to be. Just you. And choosing them anyway." She died that night, in the bed she'd shared with Rhett for nearly 50 years. Her last thought was of the notice, the risk, the choice that had changed everything. The ranch continued. The valley remained. And somewhere in the records of Montana history, a small footnote about a woman who'd stood up to corruption and won. But the real story, the one about 2 lonely people finding each other and building something that mattered, that story lived on in the land itself, in the cattle that grazed the valleys, in the children and grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of courage and partnership. Because that's what matters in the end, not the running or the hiding or even the victory, but what you choose to build when you finally stop running and start living. That was Eliza and Rhett's story, and it was in every way that counted a good one.